Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Burton Burger Podcast. We are on episode 158. Thank you for stopping by. We actually have another guest on. We went on a bit of a dry spell with guests. I guess two people were just too shy to come on B&B here. I definitely understand that. But we got one this time, and we're very excited to talk to him. It's Mr. Micah Haley. Micah, what's going on? Happy to see you, buddy.
Hey, friends. How's everything going?
It's going good. It's going great now that you're here in this Discord call with me instead of my cousin and only him. So, happy.
I'm sure your cousin is a big get. He's got a busy schedule.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about Craig. He's not talking about you, Bert. So, Micah, welcome aboard. So, we got Mr. Micah Haley on this show today. Micah, you want to kind of introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Micah Haley, and I am a film producer and screenwriter. And I currently have a Western called The Old Way that is out in theaters with Mr. Nicolas Cage, which is very exciting. And it's also on iTunes, Amazon, wherever you'd like to check it out. So yeah, I'm making the rounds, saying hello to everybody, and seeing what's good in the world.
Yeah, no, it's pretty. We got a pretty serious deal on the show here, ladies and gentlemen. So Bert and I, we learned our lines. We're trying to impress a film producer here, just in case they have any other job opportunities coming up. So this is basically our audition tape, Micah. So let us know if we
Oh, let's do it. Let's
get
do
a
it.
part or not.
Well, we'll just transcribe this podcast, shove it into GPT, and then we've got a script.
Mm-hmm.
There
yes,
we
sir.
go.
That's how that works, right?
Yeah.
That's how
So,
that works.
yeah.
I think
Right?
so. That's what
Okay.
Spielberg does, I heard. So, but yeah, we got Micah Haley here. So Reddit is a beautiful place, and it's kind of where I'm starting to find more and more guests that are actually cool and not just people that are like, I don't know, like Bert. So you guys were doing a AMA about your movie, The Old Way, like you said, starring Nicolas Cage, and it is the actual Nicolas Cage. It's not some actor named Nicolas Cage.
It's the real guy.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the real guy.
It's the real guy, and you guys said, ask us anything. So, of course, I'm like, yo, come on our podcast, will you? And you're like, sure. I'm like, holy shit, okay. Because I checked out some of the stuff there, and I'm like, these guys seem pretty cool. They seem pretty laid back. It's a pretty successful Reddit account, I guess. I don't know if I should say that out loud. I don't know if that's an insult or not. Like, oh yeah, you got a nice Reddit account. I don't know, but and then yeah, we ended up getting something set up, and also I had no idea who was coming on. I didn't know if it was Micah. I didn't know if it was some guy named Brett. I didn't know if Nick himself was coming on. I'm like, oh, we're gonna. I hope it's the producer, because there's a lot of film stuff I want to talk about. But yeah, I guess you, Nick, and Brett share the same Reddit, right? Is that what's going on?
Well, I think they're they're a little bit older than I am, so they're probably not quite as Reddit savvy. So
Sure.
whenever one of my friends in film needs a Reddit AMA, I'm happy to jump in and quarterback that, just so we don't end up in like a Rampart style debacle. So yeah, I do the typing and just talk to everybody on Zoom while we're sharing a beverage.
Sure. So, tell us a bit about your kind of film career over time, because for me personally, I wanted to be an actor for a very long time, and I did classes, and I went and did all of this cool stuff with it, and then I had a guy tell me, well, Burger, you see, the odds of becoming an actor and supporting your family, not even being big or even kind of big, are the same odds as winning the lottery. So I scratched my baby head and I said, I don't know about that. It's kind of, I don't know. So I went a different way in college, but I'm still absolutely enthralled by the film world. Bert and I talk about it all the time. So now that we got like an actual producer, like someone that knows this thing about it,
Sure, throw your questions at me.
So basically, can you give us like a timeline of your career? I mean, we could probably spend a minute here talking about
absolutely.
it, but what's it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in film in the mid 2000s. Essentially, I was in college. I was thinking about going to to LA and starting my career in film, but I didn't. This is the thing. Like when you're young, people people think like, oh, I just need to know the one thing that I want to do. But I think the far more common circumstances, there's like three or four things that you could pursue,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all sort of a good fit for some features of your personality or whatever, but it's really more about whittling away what's not going to work for you for lifestyle reasons or other reasons, right? Or pay
Mm-hmm.
reasons, another big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in college and I'm ready to graduate, and then Hurricane Katrina hits and just totally destroys South Louisiana. So
Yeah.
it
Little
was it
detour.
was insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was pretty insane. And basically what happened is everything below Baton Rouge, where I went to college, was wiped off the map, and there's whatever military coming in, and so everybody went north to Baton Rouge, and LSU, where I was going to school, became this big triage center.
Sure.
Like it was this big place where people would come to get
Yeah.
fixed up and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and that made it really really difficult to go to class, right?
I
So
bet.
immediately at
Yeah.
that point
Yeah.
I'm looking for what my next thing is, and I was like, all right, how am I going to get into film? I don't know anybody. I'm like the total opposite of a nepo baby. Never met anybody that has ever received $1 from the film industry, and then I do what every dork of my generation does, which is I got on the internet and I started googling around, and magically the film industry had come to Louisiana. There were these tax credits in Louisiana that made it very attractive for filmmakers to come and shoot there.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a month after Hurricane Katrina, Tony Scott was shooting a movie called Deja Vu with Denzel Washington in the middle of the city.
Okay.
So
Wow.
it didn't shut down film for long, and I was lucky to jump in as a PA and just threw spaghetti at the wall till I got a job.
Yeah.
And I really just came up on set and learned production, and worked with some cool people like Jeff Bridges and Justin Timberlake and Sam Jackson, and I got to meet some of these people pretty early on, which was fun.
Wow.
And
That's
then
cool.
yeah, it was really fun, and I learned the tax credits, and that became something that not a lot of people knew about. So we call ourselves, my partner and I, we call ourselves Children of the Louisiana Incentives Program, because my partner in particular sort of pioneered using those tax credits to finance your movie in an age where banks wouldn't lend against tax credits. Right now, tax
Okay.
credits are
Okay.
considered like
I see.
now
Yeah.
they're considered like the safest part of a movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I came up in that world, and I'm an expert there, and did a bunch of entrepreneur stuff. I started a film magazine called Scene Magazine, which was great, and we ran that for 5 or 6 years. And then I just decided, you know what, I really just want to make movies. So I got together with my partner R. Brian Wright, and we founded Intercut Capital, and it's been great. We're out there financing movies. Our first movie under that banner was Jay and Silent Bob Reboot,
Mm-hmm.
which was
Okay.
super fun. That shot in New Orleans,
Yeah, I saw
and
that on your IMDb.
Yeah.
yeah, pretty great. And these were movies that were big when I was in college, so
Mm-hmm.
it was great to bring that back. And Kevin's been revisiting all of his earlier properties, so it's been a really exciting run. And you know yeah, I mean, now we're just out there looking for projects, trying to find stuff to finance. We were lucky to find this western, and Nicolas Cage was just the perfect fit for that role. And we're out there looking for new stuff.
Sure.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. No, it's just cool to talk to somebody that has lived and breathed this life, because the freaking film industry, I mean, gosh, it's its own separate thing. Like, I know it falls under entertainment, but it definitely could be like its own separate thing for how many moving parts there are with it. So uh
It is, and it's something that's particularly hard to learn, professional knowledge about. Like if you like I spent the first, I don't know, 5 years of my career trying to figure out how movies were financed. And I don't think I met anyone who knew. Like
mm,
people think they do. They'll be like, yeah, tax credits and then this and that. But really, there's a very predictable way that movies have been financed in the independent space for 40 years, probably 50 years, and it really hasn't changed that much other than it's worth less. So you have
Hmm.
less and less money to make movies, right?
Sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, once I found people who actually knew what they were doing and learned about it, I was like, oh, this isn't really this investment crapshoot. Like you're really, you hear people talk about investing in a movie, especially an independent film, and they're like, man, you're really like, rolling the dice at the craps table. And
Hmm.
it's like, well, not really. If you understand structured finance, most independent films are financed the same way a construction project is, and
Sure.
there's a bond
Yeah.
and there's insurance, and
Hmm.
Yeah.
you know what the movie is worth before you start making it. So it's a little less of a crapshoot than people think it is. It's pretty predictable, actually.
So, what's like the big difference between like an independent film and a non-independent film? Like the obvious differences, but like what makes the difference? Is it like the budget, or is it because someone said so, or how does that work out?
So yeah, it's really simple to define and then sometimes difficult to do the detective work on it if
Mm-hmm.
you're not in the middle of the deal. But essentially, the academic definition is just where the money comes from. So if
True.
the money
Yeah.
for your movie comes entirely from a studio, and under that moniker of studio, I would include, Universal, Paramount,
Mm-hmm.
Sony, aka Columbia. I would
Mm-hmm.
include the streamers. I would include Apple and Netflix, any of those companies where they essentially just take out loans and then finance movies or cash flow movies, straight out of a bank loan.
Sure.
That's studio financing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Independent financing is everything else. So it's really, people consider independent films as like, the scrappy little upstart of the studio world, right? It's like the 5% of movies that end up being independent. But in reality, I would say by count, most of the movies that are produced are independent films. And then if they're good enough and they're positioned well for sale, then they end up getting sold to streamers and studios and getting distribution through those channels. But
I see.
you
Okay.
you determine if it's an independent film based on where the money comes from to actually make the movie.
Okay. I got you. And independent stuff can be huge. I mean, Bert and I have talked about like indie games, indie music, indie films, and you don't just write these things off anymore. Especially it's 2023, right? It's like you said, like there's a lot of independent films out there that can turn into monstrous things. Like I believe that's how the Paranormal Activity movie started out. It was a nice, cute little $14,000 budget film, and ended up making like 200 and some $1 million or something. So I think it's because it
Yeah, and
took
those
that
are
path.
those are called yeah, those are little micro budget movies. I mean, those are just like literally credit card movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there's I would say the majority of independent films are under say 20 million, 25 million underneath that.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been cases, one of my mentors produced a film that was a true independent film that was about $80 million. So
Oh wow.
they are out there, and this is, the industry has a long history of this. Star Wars was very famously financed independently, and
Okay.
it looks like Francis Ford Coppola is self-financing his $100 million movie Megalopolis right now. So
Mm.
it is like
Wow.
it's not really like the unwanted no-legged dog
Mm-hmm.
of the film industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like independent film is it's just an essential part of keeping the machine of film distribution, that whole ecosystem humming. Like
Sure.
independently financed productions are very commonplace and very much needed by distributors like Netflix and Apple and these other distribution channels.
Okay. Yeah. It's a bit again more complicated than people realize, but also like super simple too when when you break it down. In
Yeah,
burger
yeah,
terms.
and it's difficult on the outside because they like to be hand wavy about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the most obvious place that this comes into play is that sort of independently minded or independent spirit film festivals like Sundance, you think of as being this hub for independent film, but every year they have films there that feel indie. They feel like they have this sort of creative affectation, but really they are financed entirely by a major distributor or a studio, and they just want you to think that it's sort of
Sure.
independent.
Sure.
Okay.
So, you gotta you're the producer of this film, right? The Old Way.
Correct.
What exactly does a producer do? I've done a lot of film stuff, and everyone that like tells me what it is, they act like I'm a fucking idiot. First of all, like, oh, a producer burger, seriously? They produce the film, and I'm like, okay, but I think there's a lot of ways to produce a film.
Correct. Yeah, and there's different titles that somehow mean different things or suggest different things, but in general, the sole producer credit or the produced by credit is considered the most prestigious. That means you were instrumental in pulling the project together and were on set
Mm-hmm.
and for some period of time and pulled the pieces together. But the better way to ask the question is like, how do I get a producer credit? Right?
Okay.
Like that's sort of
Okay.
that's like the cool lens. It's like, how do I get a producer credit? And the answer is you need to do something that was essential to getting the movie made, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
things that are essential in the independent film world, and then there's an analog of these, of course, in the studio world. But the things that are essential are bringing money to the table, bringing equity to the table is the obvious one. Bringing debt to the table. So most independent films are financed in part with loans. So it's they have these companies that specialize in film finance, and they usually pick up a couple of executive producer credits that way. You need to bring cast to the table. So they have producers out there that specialize in cast, and they'll bring,
Okay.
they'll bring a big name. They'll bring Gary Oldman, or they'll bring,
Mm-hmm.
Robert De Niro, or somebody that has major sales value. And because they're on the project, then the movie is worth, X amount sort of safely, right?
Mhm.
And then there is usually a finance producer, somebody who understands finance and how to bring all these pieces together. And you can also get a credit by being the rights holder. So, I always tell people, like, if you don't understand the finance end of it yet, one of the best ways to get a producer credit is to just go develop talent. Like, go find screenwriters that are coming up and need feedback on their scripts and cultivate their writing efforts. And then when that script is something that's good and ready to make, you can option it from them for $1, and then you're the rights holder. You're the
Wow.
person that can go and put together a deal to get that movie made, and you would get a producer credit for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally on an independent film, you have two, maybe three producers who understand and have value in two or three of these areas. But there are definitely cases where like
Mm-hmm.
there's 30 producers on the movie because they were just piecing it together
Yeah.
every which way they could.
Sure,
Heck yeah.
sure. So which one do you fall under then as that type of producer? I mean, it really reminds me of like a head coach in sports. You got head
Yeah, it's
coaches
kind of
that are
manager
really
role.
big, and the motivators, they're players. You got the XO guys. You got the guys that can pull trades together and things like that. What kind
Correct,
would you
correct,
say?
yeah.
Yeah, you are.
So typically on a movie, my partner, R. Brian Wright, and we are coming in with the financing. So we're coming in with the money. So
Okay.
we do develop projects, and I'll work with other producers. So usually what happens is other producers or directors, or in some cases writers, are preparing things. They're writing things or packaging things that they think we would be interested in, or another investor financier might be interested in. So we're not what you would call like freelance producers. Like, I'm not bouncing around financing my movies from different places.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mhm.
essentially work for one investor who funds all of our projects,
Oh, okay.
or 90% of them, and we're representing his interest in the film industry. So that means lots of different production companies and producers bring their packages to us, and it'll have a script, a director, and a name or two attached, and they're saying, do you want this? If so, what kind of offer would you like to make?
Okay.
And so we're reading the scripts and providing feedback and saying, look, this is close to what we want, but you really need to do X, Y, and Z. Or that's great that you have this name attached, but he just got me too'd into outer space, so
Okay.
maybe let's
Yeah.
replace him with this other guy who also has sales value. So it's kind of like that. It's very entrepreneurial is the way
Yeah.
to look at it. I
Sure.
mean, every movie is really a startup company. Like that's what a movie is. You open an LLC, you come up with a business plan, which is the screenplay and the schedule and the finance plan, and then you're going and raising investor capital for your startup, right? And you set it up, you fund the startup, you hire all these employees, and then you make the movie. The only difference is you shut the company down when you're done making it. That's
Hmm.
really the only
Okay.
difference. But it is very entrepreneurial, and a lot of what we do is go around almost like VCs, right? Where we're looking at these early stage companies, or in this case, feature films to invest in, and we're going and sort of godfathering and guiding people and saying, hey, if you do this, this, and this, we would be interested. If you did this and this, we would also be interested.
Hmm.
So that's a lot of what we're doing is sort of kicking the tires on projects that are brought to us, and in some cases also physically producing them ourselves, like The Old Way, which we thought was a special movie, and we ended up, physically producing that one on set, and then, we were on the ground in Montana, making sure everything was happening, and but a lot of the times we're also just investing, and we can trust those producers to go and finish and deliver the movie without a ton of oversight from us.
So, what you talked a bit about The Old Way, with how this works, like when you get an actor like Mr. Cage that says, "Yeah, let's do it," were you like, "Holy shit, we just got Nicolas Cage," or was it kind of built around him coming on, or how exactly does something like
So
that work?
the project was being put together by the producers that we essentially bought the movie from, and when you put these together, you don't know who is going to say yes. And right now, this is the real struggle for essentially every film producer, because we're not making as many movie stars. There aren't as many new movie stars that are sort of exploding, and so everybody
Not
is
yet,
sort of,
Micah. Give it some time.
no, not yet, not yet.
Wait till
Well,
this
it's
interview
different.
comes out.
Yeah, until this interview comes out, but it's different. It really is different than it was. As Dave Chappelle used to say, like all media came out of one fire hose, and the people that became famous that way, everyone knows. So everybody, my grandparents know who Dave Chappelle is.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
My grandparents know who Sylvester Stallone is, right?
Hmm.
And even Stallone's equivalent in modern features, like take somebody who's done a lot of action films. They're not as famous as Stallone was in the 90s, right?
Sure.
And the
Yeah.
internet, when the internet, broadband internet specifically in the early 2000s came out, it really splintered audiences in a way that we may never be able to quote unquote make stars again, right? So
Yeah.
they certainly have newer stars. They certainly have some that have enormous sales value, like Ana de Armas and Margot Robbie and stuff.
Hmm.
Obviously,
Hmm.
have sort of become famous after, but there's far fewer, and everybody is trying to get one of these established names in their project, and it's just really difficult because they're all doing television, right? Like there
Yeah.
used to be this line of demarcation between movie stars and television stars, right?
Yep.
Well, there
Yep.
isn't anymore, right? So Kevin Bacon does TV, Stallone does
He
TV,
does.
right?
Yep.
So it's pretty crazy. Like I mean, Meryl Streep is doing her second TV show right now. Only Murders in the Building, I think.
Sure.
Hmm.
So, there's really only a few movie stars that have never done TV, like Leonardo DiCaprio, but even they are doing feature films specifically for Netflix, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the television part of it is unique because it creates availability problems, right? Like if you bring in like Nicolas Cage in our movie, we had him for the entire shoot, which was a month, and he came in and we had him the entire month. Whereas, he might come into some shoots and just do them for a week or do them for 2 weeks. But when you're on a television series, that could be 4 months of your
Mm-hmm.
year.
Oh yeah.
That could be 6 months of your year,
Yeah.
right? So it really sort of sucks up their availability. It makes it very difficult to cast any big names right now. And we were very fortunate on this project to have Nicolas Cage take an interest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, no, seriously. And I get that. And I feel like a lot of it, it's like the same kind of thing where TV stars are now becoming their own movie stars as well, right? Like that happened a lot, like with a lot of Disney shows where you saw them growing up on the Disney Channel, like Ariana Grande, and then all of a sudden she's where she is now. Where before it was kind of you stayed in your own, like Ray Romano from
Stayed in your
Everybody
lane.
Loves Raymond, like like he never really branched out into the movie thing. He was more of a TV actor in the early 2000s, things like that.
Yeah, and on television, you make so much money
Mhm.
as an actor.
Mhm.
Like, if you have I mean, look at, Jerry Seinfeld, for goodness sake.
Mhm.
I mean, those guys
Mhm.
become immensely wealthy because of the volume of content that they're creating at a
Sure.
high level, right?
Mhm.
Right.
And look, like once you do nothing but work for 10 years on a TV show, like do you want to go work every day for the rest of your life?
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of those people are like, I this has been great. I just dumped a decade of my, what do we get? 7 decades, 8 decades?
Something like
I
that,
just dumped
yeah.
a
Somewhere in there.
decade.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, if you're
Mhm.
lucky. But they're just like, I have a lot of money and I just worked a lot. Do I really want to go and grind it out and just do nothing but features to become a movie star? Some do, some don't. It just depends on
Yeah.
who they are.
Okay. So like how much of a budget, I've always wondered this, like how much of it actually goes towards paying these big name actors?
It depends. To have a movie star that has enough international value, and that's really, just sort of my back of the napkin math when I
Mhm.
hear a name and wonder what their value is going to be before I check it with, a sales expert.
Yeah.
Um, if you can take a big TV name like Ray Romano,
Mhm.
super famous
Right.
in the United States, right? But how famous is he overseas?
In the Congo or
Mhm.
Uh,
something, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
yeah,
Probably not
it's
up there,
it's not
yeah.
like he's had Tom Cruise's career where
Yeah.
he's been out doing promo for action movies overseas for 40 or 50 years.
True, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So
So
it
even
just
like
depends.
percentage
And
based.
yeah, so like just to give you an idea, in general, if you've got a name that has significant overseas value, you're looking at like a minimum of about $1 million.
Okay.
Okay.
So and it goes up from there. In independent film, they're typically paid less. It's just different. The cost basis of everything in independent film is different and kind of less. But you can see really big names with a lot of foreign value go for on a really big movie that's probably going to go theatrical. They might make $10 million,
Mm.
Okay.
something like that. But the exciting thing about independent film for people that are participating financially in it is, um, you do have it doesn't have a set uh, you know future in with one studio or another, right? You're in some respects you're producing it independently so that you have a greater amount of creative control, but also a greater amount of control in determining which distributor you're going to give your movie to, right? So you're doing this almost like again, like as an entrepreneur, you're making a startup company with the hopes that it's going to get acquired by
Yeah.
a Google or
Yeah.
an Uber,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And and this is for the actors as well. So if you're a big name actor, yeah, maybe you take a little bit of a lower rate than you would if you were working for like Warner Brothers when you make an independent film, but you also own a portion of the back end, and if the movie is
Yeah.
very successful, you stand to benefit
You make a lot
pretty
of money from
handsomely.
it.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's at the end of the day, it's a business, right? So there's so many other business opportunities that work the same way as this.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I on TikTok I talk a lot about the nuts and bolts of the film industry, and a huge part of like the stuff that I engage with is just normalizing what film is. I mean, it's just another
Mm-hmm.
sector of commerce, and anything that most people find weird in film, I promise you I can find the analog in, the grocery chain or
Yeah.
construction, or at the end of the day it's not that strange. It's very similar to the way other industries work.
Sure.
Okay.
It's a pretty cool industry. So real quick, we're not here to talk about Nicolas Cage, so I don't want to keep beating that. But was he pretty cool to work with? Was he kind of a fucking weirdo? I mean, he's probably not going to hear this podcast, Micah, to be honest. So I mean, if you want to go ham, go ham. But I'm guessing you have some nice things to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, look, there certainly are names out there that are not as fun to work with on set, but Nicolas Cage is just the best.
Mhm.
Like he is prepared. He's an artist. Like he is the real deal. He
Mhm.
really is, and he engages on a deep story level with the people that he's making the movie with, and he really understands what's going on and is very thoughtful about his approach to character and to the project. And even just the day to day, I'm hearing stories. One of the fun part about getting a movie released is you're hearing all these stories from set that you haven't heard before.
Mhm.
And the director gave an awesome answer in the Reddit AMA where he talked about one day on set that was just particularly tense as we were sort of facing the just the nuts and bolts obstacles that you face in independent film, and he was really down, and Nick knew it and just came to set joking and lighthearted and really with the intent to lift the spirits of the director and everybody else. And he's just that kind of guy. He's a team player. I mean, all of his reps are great. I mean, he's really just it's just one of the best experiences you can have working with like an Oscar winning actor of that caliber.
He seems like one of those actors that really just enjoys the art of acting in film and things like that. So yeah, he gets a little crazy and does some things that turn him into a meme. But I think when you invest so much of yourself into it, it's going to it's gonna happen like that, right? I mean,
Yeah, and it's just a brave thing. I mean,
it
I
really
can tell
is.
you that the bravest thing actors do is just put their face and their voice in the hands of another artist,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day all they can really control is what they're doing in front of a camera. And if the lens choice of the director and the cinematographer makes them look strange, or if the story choice is odd, or like you just don't know how you're going to be perceived. You could be giving the same performance in a Coppola movie that you're giving, or in a Scorsese movie that you're giving in, I don't want to beat anybody up, but just some garbage spoof movie,
Sure.
and you
Yeah.
don't know,
Hmm.
because it's all these other craftsmen could be, making a movie that they haven't fully like communicated to you what it is, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's the influence of editors. Every
Seriously,
veteran actor knows that to some extent their performance is crafted by an editor in
hmm
post,
they can be your
with the
best friend.
guidance of a director. Yeah, and they can be hugely instrumental in bringing out the beautiful nuances. I mean, there were some things in subtleties in Nick Cage's performance in our movie The Old Way. Even though I'd seen it a ton, they're sort of lost to me until I watched it on a big
Yeah,
screen
the
like
final
four
edit.
times in a
Yeah,
row,
seriously. Yeah.
and
Okay.
you're still seeing just wonderful nuances in the things that have made Nick Cage an international superstar. He just is really good at what he does, and look, like not every actor is fortunate enough to be in this position where they can trust their director.
Hmm.
Yeah, sometimes you never even get to talk to your director. I mean, in my mind, in my experience, like just not that I'm an actor, I'm definitely not. But
Mhm.
I have many friends who are actors who I've watched come up from, extras. Like there are people I cast on their first role as an extra, 15, 16 years ago that are now regulars on TV shows. And they'll tell you the hardest part of building your career is it's being the one-liner actor, because you have to create a character and create a performance that fits with the rest of this whole that you don't understand. Like they don't even give you the whole script sometimes,
Oh, that's
right?
wild.
So you're going out there trying to make a performance where you have a one sentence line that could be pivotal,
Yeah.
and it's across from Tom Cruise, or it's across from Ryan Gosling, or and all about the whole project is it's a drama, and this is my one sentence.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And just think of how tonally weird this is. Like a bunch of my friends were in The Big Short, which was a very tonally interesting movie, right? There's a lot of comedy in it. It's about something very serious that was uh detrimental to many people's lives, the financial collapse of 2008. But it's also funny and serious.
Mhm.
Like, I mean,
Hmm.
just pick which role you are in that movie. I mean, Brad Pitt, his performance is very serious, right? Ryan Gosling is very over the top, and it's really hard to tell as an actor coming into a bigger project how your role is supposed to fit into it when all you know is like half a sentence, right? You
Right.
just know your lines. So that's a very difficult thing to do. And you have to do that on your way to becoming a name actor who has more lines and has a screen presence with an arc that needs to be crafted throughout the very disjointed production of a movie.
Well, I hope you wrote all that down, Bert, because I did. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be studying, and then Micah can quiz us here. So
Here we go.
I got to prove my
I
words
don't
somehow.
understand any of it either. I'm just, every time I'm like, I guess we're doing this again. Let's go.
Sure,
There we go.
sure. But a producer has a pretty big grip on a film, so we're gonna be best friends here because of how awesome you are, not because of your title or anything. Speaking of that, you have any strings in CBS by chance, Micah?
I don't. I
Damn.
don't. I wish I did.
Yeah,
I wish I
them
did.
bastards won't call me back for Survivor, so we've had some bigger guys come on from Survivor, and they won't help us out. So our buddy Micah was hoping to be like, "Yo, Jeff,
I wish. Are you trying to get on Survivor?
dude, I've been trying to get
Is
on
that the
there
goal?
since I was a wee lad."
It seems like the post Survivor life of the contestants is like either you're going to die an early death or you're going to become the showrunner of like White Lotus
Sure,
or another big show.
worth it.
Yeah, I want
It's
to
a
say a couple
crapshoot.
of them. What's his name? Mike White,
Mm-hmm.
the showrunner of White Lotus, was on, wasn't he?
He might have been, man. They're all over the place. I know that. And then some have some pretty bad things happen afterwards as well. It's like you said, it's a flip of a coin. I'd rather be the type of person that goes on there and then maybe people will recognize me on the street and I can do some pictures and then leave me alone afterwards. I got to focus on Bert and
Yeah,
Burger. So,
exactly.
uh,
Yeah, if I can underscore any point with your audience, it's that being famous is really not fun,
mhm,
and you don't really want to be famous.
mhm.
It comes with a lot
Yeah,
of awful crap.
that's what we've heard, and I think our big goal is we want to build like a nice community, like a good community that we can all have fun with, and they enjoy our stuff, and we enjoy having them there for like streams and TikToks and things like that. The goal is never to be the next Joe Rogan, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if Joe wants to talk, we're certainly open to it. However, I think that's the best way to go about these things, though, right? Is okay, it'd be cool if it took off and it went viral and it turned into something, but at the end of the day, it's just Bert and I having a good time. Like it's a
Oh, yeah.
passion project for us, and
This is the way to do it. If you're going to
Mhm.
be famous, just be famous for your voice,
Mhm.
because then you can
Yes.
walk around with absolute freedom.
Mhm.
We've heard that from a couple people.
Yeah, seriously, it's it makes it a lot easier as well. So, Yeah. So remember that, Micah, when you need
I will.
somebody
I will.
to help you out with that.
I will.
Some clean
I wish.
voices
I
there.
wish I had more inroads into the world of unscripted, but that's really on. That's another side of the industry. The like scripted and unscripted are just totally separate.
Mhm.
Like camera crews are different. I mean, yeah, they're just totally different sides of the industry.
Seriously, whatever they need, though. I don't care. I'll make it work. So you had something that you wanted to specifically talk about, and Bert was pretty upset about this, but you wanted us to watch the movie Skinamarink, and
Yes.
we sit down and we talk about this film. Skinamarink is a film that has gone viral, I would say, across the internet, from TikTok and Reddit to YouTube and things like that. And when we were talking to Micah, he's like, yo, we should watch it and talk about it. And this gives me an excuse to bring Bird in on it. So
Yeah.
we watched it recently. Did you end up watching it, Micah?
I have seen the film. Yes.
Okay, I was going to say, if you haven't, this is going to be weird.
Very awkward.
So yeah, I mean, you want to start us off? What did you think of it? It's a found footage horror movie, right? And we'll spoil the rest, I guess, if there's anything to spoil.
Yeah, let me see if I can provide a little more insight into it. It's this movie that was kind of a festival darling. I think it premiered at Fantastic Fest, and people were really impressed with it. But I don't think it was getting a theatrical release until a couple of months ago, and then a few smaller horror movies have really been punching outside of their weight class. Most notably, Terrifier 2 has been making a bunch of money.
Yeah, we watched that one before. It was weird because that was one of our movie time suggestions that I was talking to you about before we get there, and all of a sudden, like, are you kidding me? An actual booby time thing is causing this much attention? Like, yeah, I kind of feel like hipsters with this, with the Terrifier ones.
Well, I have to admit that the producer of Terrifier pitched me Terrifier 2, and I passed.
Wow.
So I don't know what that says about me. Yeah, I mean, there's valid reasons for passing, but
wow,
they certainly have done
that's still
something.
cool though. Like, even okay, well, I don't know if it's cool on your end, but
I would have much rather had the win. I mean, it was a simple
bet.
pass in our case. It was a simple pass. I mean, it was too small for our model. Like, they're just some movies that are just too small for us. So that certainly fell under that. So it was kind of a straightforward response to them. But my partner, I always joke about this. My partner, R. Brian Wright, has the distinction of having passed on Get Out. So I like to hold that over his head whenever I can. But the reality is that, when you're in the finance circles in independent film, you see kind of everything, so you're constantly passing on things that go on to be notable in some way or
I
another.
feel like you can't beat yourself up over that kind of stuff. Like, we do fantasy football. It's a lot freaking different than, passing on Get Out. But it's just like, man, you get all these players that were on your bench at one point that are now popping off and stuff like that. So it's like, damn, like, oh, you're right there. Yeah.
It's very similar. It's very similar. There's lots of potential, and it's just easy to Monday morning quarterback things. So it seems like Skinamarink is one of these projects that was just going to get, a VOD or streaming release.
You didn't pass on
Shudder,
this one, did you?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. So I think it's the first movie that Shudder is releasing theatrically. Shudder is a horror streaming service.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just this little movie that's getting a pretty big theatrical release. And what's interesting to me about it is that it's not a very traditional horror movie, right? It's very different than really anything you've ever seen. So are you horror guys? Did you like Skinamarink? Tell me about your experience with the film.
I don't know. We're fucking scared shitless of them, and we don't like to be scared. Does that deteriorate us from watching them? No. I'm definitely more into them than Bert is. Bert will not watch them unless it's for
On
like,
my own, unless forced.
yeah, unless it's for the podcast.
Yeah.
But I was always very, very terrified of them, very much so. And like, I wouldn't even like when I worked for like a video rental store when those things were a thing, like a little local one. I was like, I don't even want to touch these covers. Like, this is just freaking me out.
Take something home with me. I'm good.
Yeah. So like when you had to put them back on the shelves and you had to move their little thing over, I'm like using like tweezers and stuff so I didn't have to touch it. I don't know. Fucking weird. But but over time I started getting interested in the stories. Like I would hear like the plot and I'm like, that sounds really interesting. Am I going to watch it? No. Why? Because I'm scared. But one time I started dating a girl that was actually willing to watch horror movies. So then we started watching them, and then I just started watching a ton with my brother, and then we started doing this podcast. So I'm definitely a fan of horror movies. Bert, I don't know. He's a pussy, so
Yeah, I haven't gotten over him.
yeah. So, but did we like this one? Is the question?
Yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, really atmospheric. I will say that. And I think if we were to watch it in theaters rather than on like a streaming service, it would have made a huge difference in the experience with it. Would you agree with that, Bert?
Oh yeah, definitely.
It did a good job with that. So yeah, I mean, it definitely scared us a little bit. I have some opinions about it, but I kind of want to hear what your thoughts were on it, Micah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie I would not have financed. It's far too experimental.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Far too experimental, and there's no real cast in the movie.
Yeah.
unless you
Correct,
you want to count, kids' toys with googly eyes.
Uh-huh.
But there's just no, it's just such an experimental movie that it's like, I kind of look at it as like a haunted house experience.
Sure.
Like that's
Mm-hmm.
really what you're doing. And I did see it on the big screen at one of the Alamo Draft Houses, and with a very respectful audience, and very interesting experience. I mean, it's really extraordinary, like what they pulled off,
Mhm.
like the fact that they just had an idea for this movie, and then dove in with incredible discipline
Mhm.
to be able to deliver a feature film uh, that is skinamarink. I mean, it's just crazy to me. Like I would go insane like trying to edit this movie
Yeah, I
together.
bet.
Oh yeah.
I would go insane, and if I was going to do anything to it, like I would probably go in and cut out. I would either add like 25% more story
Mhm.
to what's there.
Yeah.
Like there's story there. There's definitely a narrative, but I would add just a little bit more, like
Mhm.
maybe 25% more. Like there were definitely some gaps where I felt like my brain was trying to like, hang up a shirt in the closet, and there just wasn't a there wasn't a rack to hang anything
Mhm.
on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's some of that's just like my ADHD brain
Sure.
fighting me.
Mhm.
But I would have liked to have either added more story or maybe cut the runtime back. But to get like wide distribution, you typically have to have a runtime of at least like 85 minutes. So
Okay.
they may have been in a situation at some point where they were like, can we make a feature length thing out of this, just to sell it as a feature length movie? Because they're just worth more.
Mhm.
Like if you have a movie that's feature length, it's just financially worth more. So, but I thought that what they did was super interesting, and it just reminded me a lot of like creepy sound design, like records. Like we used to have these old like Halloween records and stuff that we put on the record player when I was a kid.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And this was old anachronistic technology when I was a kid, so
Sure.
it's not that I'm that
Yeah.
old,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was it was it was like finding a record player, like, and it was like, oh wait, what? We have a record player? And then
Mhm.
they had these creepy old records, and there was all this cool sound design that I think, like, certain like horror podcasts kind of go for a similar experience, but I don't really think any of them have truly succeeded in creating like the immersive creepy experience that Skin and Marink has. If
Mm-hmm.
there was like a podcast version of that where I could turn in and tune in and get 30 or 45 minutes of that every week, like that would be incredible.
Sure.
Right.
But yeah, it's got some memorable moments, but that are incredible. But there's also just kind of a lot of sitting around and um not having enough to hang your hat on. That's kind of
So
how I felt
Yeah.
about it.
that's kind of what we talked about. So my big thing with it is like I don't want to sit here and bitch about certain things that they very purposely were trying to do. It's like you said, they were experimental. So the whole dragging things on, I feel like was on
kind of-
purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. It built onto what they were trying to achieve, I feel.
Our big thing is there were so many terrifying moments that were freaking just a touch away from being terrifying. Like you got all the way up, you got all the way up, you got all the way up to it, and then it just didn't deliver on it. It just started going back and back and back to where you were just sitting at a normal heartbeat, and it would go up and go up and go up, and you're waiting for that big moment to just scare the shit out of you, and then nothing happens. It goes back down to it. So
Suspense was there.
the suspense was there, but I feel like when the suspense just edges you as much as that did, I mean, it's just like, come on, we're gonna start turning blue here soon, if you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah, it becomes
I need a release.
exhausting, and it's one of the reasons a lot of very serious, very effective horror movies have laughs in them. I mean, even The Exorcist, which is a very dark movie, has humor and has sequences. You're breaking up the experience and including comedy, including levity, because people need a break.
Yeah.
People need whether you're professionally tasting wine or coffee or whatever, like you've got to cleanse the palate at some point with some water, and you've got to give your brain a break, right? And this movie felt very taxing, and I mean, what it does some things extraordinarily well, and it's like I'm so glad it's getting a big conversation, because it is something worth talking about in many respects. But is it a movie that's going to break out like Paranormal Activity and really have people coming back to the theater? I don't really think so. I just don't think there's enough of a narrative there, because it's not really a narrative film. It's more of just like a 90-minute tone poem or a 100-minute tone poem, So there are things to like about it, but it is, I mean, I would say I've seen it twice in theaters, and both times the thing I enjoyed the most was just for the ending to come, so that I could see the audience's reaction.
Yeah, that wasn't my favorite part.
That was the best part about seeing it in a big group, is to just look around and see what other people thought about it, and to see what they got from it that I missed. But it's definitely an interesting film and has made for a lot of cool TikTok memes. So
it was. I mean, it's a very dark film too, not as in like dark, like philosophically, like you fucking need a flashlight to see it at times. So we weren't sure if the lines on the screen were from our eyes or from the actual TV screen from it, but like, that movie could have been so creepy. Like, my favorite horror movie I've seen was Sinister, because of how just uncomfortable that movie made me feel and how spooky it was. Like, it was actually terrifying. Just like, you could have paused it and just stared at the fucking screen and it would have given you the willies. I mean, it was terrifying, and I really felt like this film could have done that if you could see this spooky figure that kept talking in that creepy voice. Like, if you could just see an outline of a person kind of, or of a figure of or a monster, like where you were looking down the hall and the hall was dark, if you could just kind of see him standing there, like that would have just sent me to that would have made me
Me
go
to the moon.
bananas, as Bert says. So like I wish there was more like that. And then there was that scene like where Dad's sitting on the bed and Dad tells you to look under the bed, and you do, and then you look up, and then Dad's still just sitting there normally, and then Mom tells you to close your eyes, and then you open your eyes and Mom's gone. Like there was times where it could have been so creepy.
Yeah.
And they
Could have
didn't
been
do it.
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. The under the bed thing was definitely one of the creepier moments. But yeah. But I also think I also would have liked some sense of place. I mean, little kids like that are the age of the two children in the movie have a good sense of the layout of their homes, you know.
Right.
And I think that there were some the command to like or the whatever it is, the suggestion to come upstairs is a very creepy thing, but I think it would have been creepier if I had some idea of like how the apartment or how the house was laid out. And you don't really, you just sort of have these disembodied quote unquote rooms, right? Where we end up in. And I think it also would have gone a long way towards helping to create anticipation, because like when the kids are like going back to the living room, going back to watch television, going back to eat, you have some sense of like, okay, they're moving through the hallway, they're moving through the kitchen, they're on their way back to the living room, but are they going to get there? Is something going to interfere?
Sure.
And I think like the instinct or the ethos that they adopted, where just the camera work is clearly, it's almost like it's not really representative in any way of like how humans see the world. It's almost like the director's lens was like what do they call it, remote viewing, you know, where you're closing your eyes and trying to remote view like somebody else's experience, where you're not really getting a literal interpretation of what they're seeing. You're just sort of capturing glimpses of what their visual experience is.
Yeah, it was. I'm glad it's getting the attention that it's getting. Like you said, I think hopefully this really turns a new leaf for future films, to maybe expand on this and do it a little bit better. But that was my big complaint with it. I don't want to say how there was nothing and it was boring and the pacing was long and everything, because I think that's what they were trying to do. But I think the creepiness part could have been so much more if you could have just seen some more figurines, and then it would just and that
it feels like the short film of like a really talented director, and then the next movie they make is like a huge theatrical success. They take the tools and the creepiness and the tools that they honed, right? And then you take that and you marry it with a narrative that sort of allows you to use those new discoveries like to full effect. And I love it because I feel like popular horror movies have become so traditionally narrative. I think we need to move back to them being more experimental. I think historically it's been a big injection of new success and new excitement into the horror genre, in particular with a movie like The Exorcist, which was an enormous box office hit. And prior to that, they were, horror movies were really sort of, gothic. They were sort of like, just the old, Universal horror movies. That's kind of what they were. They tended to be gothic. They tended to be, rich old British guys like living in some castle. Think of the Hammer horror movies. And when The Exorcist debuted, it was by this director who was really well known for his very realistic movies and documentaries. So it was shot with this sort of documentary ethos. and there were highly experimental things in it. Everything from the score to the insertion of these like images of Satan, right, that are just sort
Sure.
of spliced into the movie, and the dream imagery, right, where Father Karras is like, trying to reach out to his mother in a dream and there's no sound. That's sort of like that language, that experimental language, I think enhances the
Yeah.
terror, right, of a
Mhm.
well-made horror film. And I feel like we've kind of gotten away from that and closer to, it just feels like every big budget horror movie that's coming out recently is like The Conjuring, where it's a very well-made, well-polished narrative. And I hope post Skinamarink we see some more experimental visuals and sound design injected into the genre.
Well, it just sounds like they, I don't need a producer to give them a chance, you know? So it's just like, and this is a serious question too. Like, you want to see more experimental stuff, but then one of the reasons why you didn't do this or wouldn't have done it is because it's too experimental. Is that kind of like a clash between like your personal wants and like the business man that's coming out there? It's like this, I love the idea, but financially it doesn't make sense for us, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just not the type of movie that gets financed independently the way we finance them. I mean, movies that we make, like at a minimum, they cost about $5 million,
I see. Yeah.
and once you get into that space, 4 or 5 million or up, you need major cast to make it a safe investment. And a movie like this doesn't offer the opportunity to cast a major name,
Right.
So, if the father, for instance, was like an on-camera character, and I had the opportunity to cast Jeremy Renner or somebody like that,
And Skinamarink.
that would be a little bit of a different story. Yeah,
Yeah. It'd be
exactly.
a very different movie
Um,
though at that point as well.
would be a
Yeah.
very, very
Yeah.
different movie. But great movies are frequently when a great script is married with the perfect budget, and sometimes that budget is $5,000.
Yeah.
Sometimes sometimes at that lower budget level, you're really getting the best product. I don't know that this movie, I don't know that Skinamarink would have been better if it had been, a $3 or $4 million budget. It probably would have been worse.
Probably. Yeah. I mean,
Oh yeah.
they made things happen. Maybe their disappearing of like the toilet or something could have been a little bit cleaner. But other than that, yeah, I think I definitely see on that. But it was it was good. I just think they fell flat on some things, but again, it's not really. This is one I don't want to talk too much crap about because they probably were very intently trying to do certain things. I don't think it was just bad editing to have as many drawn out scenes as they did, or bad directing. I'm pretty sure that was what they were going for. So, it was a good one, though. It was an adventure for Bert and I. We might have talked more about fantasy football during the movie than we normally do with other movies, but
So did you watch it in the same place, or were you guys remotely?
we were together. Yeah,
checking it out?
We were in the same room.
Interesting. Interesting.
But
I think it's going to be a movie that gets rediscovered, and you're going to have people like, if I was going to use the old tried and true technique of getting a girl to hang out with me in high school,
Sure,
right?
sure.
You get that horror movie going, man. You know what I'm saying? Well, I think my tactic with this movie would be, hey, let's watch this, and then I bring her over and we only watch like the second half of it.
Yeah.
would probably be the move, right?
Oh yeah.
But I think you are going to have this cult following of this movie,
Sure.
and you're going to have young people showing it
100%.
showing it to others in college and dorm rooms, and it's going to have this cool life where people are like, you just have to see this stuff that happens at the end.
You got to see it to really feel it. You brought up a good point. I think that's funny that people will go watch horror movies because the girl will be scared and she'll want to cuddle up against the guy and shit like that. Well, first of all, I mean, Bert would be the girl in this situation, but second of all, isn't it like a little weird, like us guys are like, oh, this is so hot. Like I got this hot chick just cuddling up with me, and I wonder what base we're gonna make it to by the end of this. And then you got a girl that's literally scared fucking shitless watching this movie right now. Like we don't like there is two very different emotions going on right here, and it's gonna mix together. And I don't know if you're gonna like what's gonna come out of it, buddy.
It's just fun to scare all your friends.
It is,
I mean,
yeah.
I love going. I have a list of people that love seeing horror movies in theaters, and I invite them when I go watch something, and but I also love pulling people into it who don't know exactly what they're in
What's
for.
about to go on?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've got a good female friend, and me and one of my co-conspirators are always tricking her into seeing horror films, even though she doesn't have the constitution to watch like the opening credits. Like she just can't make it through.
Mm-hmm.
The second there's like the slightest vibe of creepiness, she's just out.
Mm-hmm.
So we've drug her to more than one theatrical presentation where she's literally watching the movie, between two fingers.
Saying,
trailers.
that's how we do
Yeah.
it. I mean, I ain't gonna brag.
Oh, yeah.
There's times where I'm like, I'm not watching. Like, I am not looking at the screen right now.
Like at
I
the
don't
end,
care.
I didn't watch the end. I mean, I know what happened, but I did not.
See, I was like that with the bed scene. Like that one, I said I'm flat out not going to watch it. But at the end, I was able
that
to
one
be
was
like,
bad, too.
yeah, I was not having it. But
You know what else is strange is the other thing that Skinamarink sort of played with is it feels like the gamification of the film industry. It feels more like the closest comp I could give to Skinamarink would be like an indie horror video game you download on Steam
mhm.
and then like stream yourself just absolutely losing your mind over some creepy thing that pops up. But a lot of those aren't really narrative. It's just a premise. It's just you're in a house and there's something in there with you, and how do you survive, right? And I think Skinamarink probably owes some debt to that video game genre.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. It just and it's like, guys, this is what happens when you take a chance on nobodies. You know what I mean? Like it could turn into something good. There's so many amazing actors and so many amazing singers and directors and writers and things like that could literally make the next big thing if given the opportunity, right? I understand the financial side of it, and you got to be wise with it, and they got to be feeling the right vibes with it. But Skinamarink got very lucky for it to take off the way that it does. Guarantee if it didn't get that exposure, it would have just been a $15,000 movie that might have made like 20 grand or something like that. I might be over exaggerating that, but the thing is there's so many small baby projects and all forms of media out there that could turn into this big successful thing if given that opportunity. Like Bert and Burger, right? Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I didn't even think about us for a second
Done.
there, but
Just send me your Swift number. I'll wire you guys $5 million. Okay,
Sure.
Just give it back to me in 12
I
months.
don't even
Here we go.
know what we would do with $5 million with B&B, honestly. But we get like $100 like from TikTok Live over 6 months, and we're like, yo,
Yeah.
what do we do? Do we Mr. Beast this or what?
Amazing.
But talking about just messed up movies, we talked about this briefly, Micah, but we have a section on our show that we do every single time a guest comes on called Booby Time. And because of this, we're going to need you to DM us some photos. You said you use Dropbox right now. I'm kidding. I can feel the uncomfortableness energy coming from us. No, Booby Time, Movie Time sounds the same thing. We're 6 years old. So, I told you we have this section where we ask people, what's the most messed up movie you've seen? What's the most fucked up one that you've seen? And you tell us what it is. And you being a big film guy, I'm sure you've seen all sorts of them. You tell us what it is, and we will watch it by our next episode. So Bert and I will sit down together. We will watch it just like we did with Skinamarink. You're the first guy to give us a booby time before we even asked for a booby time. So congrats on that,
Yeah.
Micah. That was pretty badass.
Oh.
And now we'll do one
I'll do what I
afterwards
can.
as well. So we got a pre-booby and a post-booby. What's your post one?
Okay, so I'm going to recommend a film called Session 9. Have you seen this film?
Oh, boy, have I seen this one. Is this about crazy people, like a mental health thing?
Yeah, so the
I've seen this a long
premise
time ago.
Yeah, so the premise is, I think it would be a good follow up to Skinamarink because it does so many things right.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a just a horror film, I mean, it was this low budget movie. I actually think it was the first low budget movie shot in HD to get distribution,
Uh-huh.
and it was shot on HD, and you'll recognize some
Oh
faces
yeah.
in it. It was directed by Brad Anderson, who's like a wonderful director, and
Yeah.
essentially, yeah, it's about this like asbestos cleaning crew who goes into a mental hospital, and they are cleaning it, and they're on a really short schedule, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they have to go in and clean it in like a week or two, and then all this creepy stuff that starts happening. And the part about it that reminds me of Skinamarink is, of course, this mental asylum may or may not be haunted, but it does these interesting things with sound design. And there's a character in the movie who goes to like the psych ward and starts listening to these old like reel to reel tapes
Mm-hmm.
of like recorded sessions, and obviously session 9 is the ultra creepy one, but without doing like insane, exorcist level special effects or crazy VFX. I mean, it's a very low budget movie. The whole thing was probably $1 million, but just what they do with the sound design, right?
Okay.
And just wonderful acting. Like they create some of the creepiest moments like in film. I've been talking about this movie for over 20 years,
Okay.
right? It's
Okay.
just so good. And by the way, one of the casting directors was Georgianne Walken, who is the wife of Christopher Walken.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But yeah, it's a really great movie. I think you can get it. I think you can get it on streaming in a couple of different places.
Sure.
But really, really great horror film to check out if you've never seen it before.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I've seen this before. I could not remember a single thing about it besides the guy from CSI Miami's in it. um, the redhead guy that my grandma thinks is cute. That's it. So I'm excited to watch this again because that's one of my favorite things to do with movies is go back to ones that I watched before and then seeing if I can see it with a different lens. I'm gonna be honest, my lens is gonna be pretty non-existent. I don't remember I remember the cleaning crew that you were saying there, Micah, but I could not tell
Yeah.
you a single thing about it outside of that. So
It has some really incredible writing, and the stuff it does well as an independent film. Like if somebody was to bring me this movie, is it's a single location horror movie, right?
mhm.
So much when you make a movie, so much of the money goes to just moving around,
Yeah.
right? Loading up the trucks and going somewhere new.
Mhm.
That is a very expensive endeavor. And whenever you can write something where you just set up base camp and you shoot the whole movie at that location, that's a good thing because then you get to spend the money you do have on screen, right? And they actually do have a great cast in this movie. They have Josh Lucas, who is doing a cool thing on Yellowstone right now as like sort of the young Kevin Costner.
Mhm.
It's got David Caruso, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
but it's also got Peter Mullen, who's just like this incredible actor, who I don't think people have come to appreciate for his talents until more recently in movies like Tyrannosaur and very memorably on Ozark. If you watch Ozark, he
Mhm.
plays like a
Oh yeah.
total
Yep.
psychotic, drug kingpin in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
But he's just such a great actor, and the movie is great writing, incredible performances, and then just great sound design. Like you can just tell they made an incredible movie with the very limited funds that they had.
Sure. No, we will definitely check that one out, and then we will talk about our thoughts on it in our next episode. So you'll have to stay tuned.
very exciting.
For
Yeah.
that one, Micah. We'll give her
Very
a whirl.
exciting. I'll have to. I know. I'll have to subscribe and check that one out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll have to be a subscriber to the BM. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely excited to check this out. And mental asylums they're good ones to write spoops about.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
for sure. We'll give her a whirl. So, yeah, I mean, you said you like movies that don't move around a lot because they're pretty cheap. I have a movie idea where you're in a box floating through outer space, and it's going to make millions of dollars, Micah. So if you're curious about it, I'll have to,
It sounds
to
good.
let you know about it.
Good.
You know, it's one of those things that's like, all right, it's about a box floating through outer space, right? This guy's got to have some kind of idea because he knows how stupid that sounds.
Fraggle Rock spinoff. If I could, work in some classic IP there, we might really have something going.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, the guy that's in the box, his best friend is Will Smith. So I got to DM Will when he's got some time. Yeah, it's just like when you're writing something, you picture a certain person.
Right about now.
Yeah. So it was always him, but we can drop it down a notch to Denzel. That's fine. Whatever works. But anyways, that's about all the time we got. I know you're a busy guy and got some other things you got to get going on, Micah. But before we wrap it up, do you want to shout out your stuff where people can find you? I know you said you have TikTok and things like that. Shout it out.
Yeah, sure. If you've got any questions about filmmaking or the film industry, you can follow me on TikTok at Micah Haley. I just answer people's questions there. It's like my fun thing to do while I'm waiting for Zooms to start.
Okay.
So yeah, follow me on TikTok, and then I'm also on Instagram at It's Micah Haley, and I answer questions there too if you've got them.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of the links for Mr. Micah's stuff will be down in the description. So make sure you guys check them out. But yeah, thank you, Micah, for stopping by. It was a hoot. It was a lot of fun to actually sit down and talk with somebody. Bert, thank you for saying literally less than our guests every time. Always appreciate it. So other than that, guys, we're Bert and Burger. We're just trying to bring a little bit of the family element to the podcast world. And don't you forget, you cuties, that it's just comedy. Please calm down just a touch.
Yeah. Take it easy.
Take it easy, seriously. All right, we'll see you guys in the next episode, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you next time.